All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us during the Lytham Partners Winter 2021 Investor Conference and what we're calling our 2022 Vision event. My name is Robert Blum, Managing Partner of Lytham Partners, and during this Fireside chat, we welcome INVO Bioscience, ticker symbol of INVO on the NASDAQ, and their CEO, Mr. Steve Shum. I'm going to dive into questions in just a moment, but I want to remind everyone that if you'd like to arrange a one-on-one meeting with Steve, please send me an email. That's Blum, B-L-U-M, @lythampartners.com, and I'll go ahead and get you taken care of. So, Steve, welcome. Let's get started.
Thank you, Robert.
Perfect. So help set the stage for the viewers here. INVO has developed an alternative solution to in vitro fertilization or IVF. Walk through the INVO process and how it differs from IVF.
Sure. Let me just take a minute to welcome everyone listening in or watching today. INVO has developed a medical device, which we call the INVO cell, which I'm holding here in my hand for those that are watching today. This is the only in vivo device on the market that enables what is now becoming a recognized alternative treatment referred to as IVC. The patient management process and procedure steps are similar between IVF and IVC, with the key exception that the 3 to 5 day incubation phase, which is critical for a critical phase for fertilization and early embryo development, is happening inside the patient's body with IVC versus outside the body in a sophisticated laboratory incubating machine, as is the case with IVF. So we believe there's a number of patient and clinic advantages to the IVC process. For patients, this includes a more affordable option and one that is more emotionally connecting for the patient. For clinics, this includes greater efficiencies, especially within the lab, which facilitates an ability to treat more patients with less resource needs. Let me go a little beyond Robert's question here, though. I think it's also important to understand some of the key market dynamics within the fertility industry. Size. Today, it's estimated close to a $20 billion global market, including at least 5 to 6 billion here in the US. Growth, the market continues to expand thanks to a number of tailwinds. In many parts of the world, infertility rates continue to increase. Overall birth rates have declined. There has been, or what we continue to see, is increased push by various governments through private and public insurance options to help patients with care. I would say we believe there's been improved acceptance by potential patients towards seeking fertility assistance. So again, these various factors in the market really help drive demand and growth within this industry. It's also really important to note that there's a very large underserved patient market out there with really a substantial number of patients that fail to receive advanced care that need it. And again, the only advanced care options today are IVF and more recently IVC. And again, INVOcell enables the IVC process.
So let's talk about a couple of those points that you just mentioned there, and let's start with data, right? Discuss some of the clinical data you have and where INVO sits compared to IVF and maybe IUI, right? Intrauterine insemination.
Sure. Intrauterine insemination is a treatment option, but it's not one that we would consider advanced fertility treatment. It's comparatively a simple procedure and relatively low cost, but it also has a much lower success rate. The success rates for IUI are not as well tracked, but we believe that most in the industry generally accept roughly an 8 to 10% success rate that is often quoted. But of course, success rates can vary depending on the specific patient issues. On the other hand, with advanced fertility treatment for IVF and IVC, patient outcomes or success rates are, very well tracked through SART, the Society for Assisted Reproductive Technology. It's a member organization that many clinics are members of. And beginning in 2017, with the launch of INVOcell, the real market usage data around the IVC process was included in the overall patient outcomes data set. So we could begin to see IVC compared to IVF. And what we see in the US market data reflects similar outcomes to IVF within a few percentage points when properly comparing apples to apples data. And by the way, our original clinical data that we submitted to the FDA as part of our de novo submission reflected comparable outcomes to IVF as well. Again, when you're comparing apples to apples data.
All right, let's talk pricing now. What are some of the pricing differences between INVO and the competing technologies?
Yeah, it does vary across the clinics. Many of the early adopting clinics that are active with the INVOcell have priced at an average of about half the typical cost of IVF. And we are doing the same or even a little better within the new jointly owned INVO centers.
And what are some of those drivers? Why is it half? Why is it that much lower?
Yeah, there's a few factors that play into this. The most important one being the efficiencies for the lab. INVOcell alleviates the need for the lab incubator and the corresponding resources to manage those machines. This frees up space and human resources and enables the lab to handle more volume using INVOcell. Another factor that plays a role in the cost and something many of the practitioners utilize relates to the specific protocol used with INVOcell. We often describe this as a more streamlined approach with INVOcell, which may include a lower drug stimulation protocol for the patient, which helps reduce office visits and the need for monitoring during the treatment process, all of which further helps reduce patient costs.
Okay. On the topic of cost here is insurance coverage, right? Is the solution covered by insurance?
The INVOcell device is not currently covered by insurance, but remember, with the exception of the device itself and the incubation step, the rest of the IVC procedure steps are essentially the same as IVF. So to the extent that patient has insurance reimbursement for things like medication and diagnostics and monitoring, then those would also be covered for an IVC procedure.
And talk about maybe IVF insurance coverage and what impact would occur to the business if insurance increased for fertility coverage across the board?
From a broad perspective, insurance trends are moving in favor or increasing for advanced fertility treatment, and that is a key tailwind or benefit for the industry. It helps drive further demand for service, especially when you have such a large underserved patient population out there. It's a very positive dynamic for growth, particularly when you think about that underserved patient segment. And keep in mind, the unmet need market represents several billions of dollars of incremental industry growth in the US market alone, and it's likely an even bigger potential outside the US.
One of the items I think you mentioned at the beginning, and you mentioned quite often in your press releases and presentations and things of that nature, is capacity. Talk about what that means within the context of INVOcell here.
Sure. From our viewpoint, again, this relates primarily to the efficiencies with the INVOcell technology as it relates to the lab resources, both equipment and people. We are replacing the sophisticated lab machine with our simple device and utilizing the patient's own body to serve as the incubator. We believe this allows a clinic to treat more patients with less resources and is exactly something one of our key partners who now runs our Birmingham INVO Center, by the way, helped to verify in their previous clinic. The Birmingham, Alabama team really validated an ability to handle several times the volume of patients using INVOcell in the IVC process versus conventional IVF. All of which means that we believe INVOcell is adding, the much needed capacity to the overall fertility infrastructure. And we stress this point because capacity constraints do represent a key challenge for the industry in terms of addressing the large underserved patient population. And again, really unlocking that whole new or additional segment to the market.
So you've got IVF centers, which have all of the incubators and the overhead and the equipment, things of that nature, versus an INVO center, and you just alluded to your Birmingham center there. What is sort of the average cost of an INVO center compared to that of an IVF center?
Yeah, another good point. We do believe an INVO center is a much more cost-effective clinic to set up than an equivalent IVF clinic. With lower lab equipment requirements being a key driver. We do think less people resources are required. We believe, based on our initial experience, that the average upfront setup cost for an INVO center, if we're building a brand new ground up operation, will average, again, those startup costs will average around $750,000.
Okay.
And we think that a comparable IVF clinic would be several times that.
Okay. Let's talk commercialization now. And let's maybe start U.S. first, and then we'll go international. You mentioned INVO clinics here a moment ago. Talk about what your commercialization strategy is in the U.S., what that's going to look like going forward. I know you recently exited an agreement with a U.S. distribution partner, so maybe talk a little bit about that as well.
Sure. As we noted in a recent release around this, we will be assuming full control of the U.S. market from our distribution partner starting on January 31st, so in about 45 days from now. We've generally avoided trying to speculate what exactly drove the decision by the partner, since we're not privy to their internal decision making. I would point out a few facts. Ferring is a pharmaceutical company, and hence their primary business and focus is on their core drug business. Ferring was very focused on distributing our INVOcell device into the existing IVF clinics. And we have seen a generally slower integration and utilization trend with INVOcell in most of those existing IVF practices. There are a few notable exceptions to that, but this was the case for INVO initially when we began commercialization ourselves, as well as during Ferring's efforts. Of course, this was or is a key reason we have been very focused on building INVO centers and delivering the technology through an INVO clinic or center format, which we believe provides a very valuable additional market channel. And ultimately, over time, we think those INVO centers will help drive broader awareness and help with utilization rates within the existing IVF clinic market. We will very much continue to support the IVF clinics. As we noted in the release, we feel we are fully capable with our team of servicing the existing IVF clinic market. And again, we'll certainly do so as we complete the transition and take over.
Okay. You expect to have, I think, you have right now 3 clinics up and running, which are sort of JVs, and one more expected by the end of this year, I think is what's been communicated. Walk us through what that sort of business model looks like, and again, why you believe that's an attractive approach to the market.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we do have the first 3 INVO centers now up and running. As a quick update, we can now see that the 4th, which we've talked about in California, which we had hoped to complete by year end, will slip into the early part of the new year. Of course, we try to control the variables that we can, but like many companies out there, we've been impacted in terms of timelines due to COVID and supply chain, and labor shortages. So we've had to adjust our timelines on the planned California center by a little bit. But we have the lease, we have our floor plan, equipment is on order. We're trying to work through the various build out of the facility plan and complete that as soon as possible. And go ahead.
No. I mean, let's talk a little bit about, what does that model look like? What is the revenue potential for each one of these clinics?
Yes, we've commented quite a bit about this. We expect the average cycle or treatment cost in the U.S. to be approximately $6,000 per cycle, although that may vary somewhat depending on location. We remain comfortable that around 200 cycles per year would enable a clinic to reach break even. We have set a first year goal to ramp a clinic or a center to a 500 annual cycle run rate, at which point we would expect the center to be nicely profitable.
Okay. This is our 2022 vision event. A lot of the questions we've been asking of folks is really focused on what their plans are for 22. What should investors expect in terms of clinic expansion in 2022?
Yeah, with the change in the U.S. distribution approach, the good news is we no longer have any restrictions on the number of INVO centers we could develop in the U.S. market. So we are expanding our thinking around such expansion and how best to approach it. We also know it's a lot of work to go from planning to clinic operational status and treating patients. We certainly plan to build additional centers in 2022. And as we get into the new year, we will try to provide additional details or specifics around what we think can be accomplished. I will say that we have done an initial review and I've identified at least what we believe are at least 20 markets with solid demographics, relative existing levels of care or capacity around the US that we think would be great locations.
Okay. Putting the US aside for a moment, let's look internationally. You've signed a number of agreements across the world really to distribute INVOcell, and actually have an INVO center in Mexico. Talk about what the market looks like, how you're looking to approach commercialization in each one of the markets around the world.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that there is a fair amount of work involved in developing an international market that goes beyond just the initial step of identifying a distributor. That includes, going through local product registrations before we can begin importing the product. COVID is, and of course, COVID has had a fairly substantial impact on those timelines, as the health departments in a number of these countries are prioritizing and often short-staffed. Training is a critical, part of the equation, training the distributor, as well as identifying initial practitioners and clinics willing to be those early adopters of the technology, which of course they need to be trained and often want to go through or conduct, initial trial cycles to get familiar and acclimated to the product. All of those steps take time. And the training process itself requires multiple sessions. The good news is we've worked through a number of these steps in certain markets, and we do believe we will see increased revenue related activity from certain international markets as we head into 2022.
Okay, and any, on the same side as we looked about what your plans were maybe for 22 and maybe just sort of touched on them, but any sort of international expansion plans that people should be looking for in 22 outside of some of the things that are already in place?
Yeah, our key focus internationally is really around supporting the existing arrangements we have developed and seeing those partners become successful rather than attempting to expand to a lot of new markets. That's not to say we won't entertain opportunities, just rather our larger focus is on the existing markets we have already put into the mix. Also, as you mentioned earlier, a little closer to home, we intend to work closely with our Mexico partner to build up the initial Mexico INVO Center, as well as look for opportunities to help them expand. We believe our partner down there has a lot of interest in expanding as well. Also, we are very focused in wanting to build the Canadian market opportunity, both developing an initial INVO Center up there, as well as building awareness and traction around the existing clinics.
Okay, great. And then sort of the couple of minutes we have left here, let's talk a little bit about the team. You've added some key people to the team over the past year or two. Talk a little bit about the organization and how you believe you are positioned to sort of execute on the plans that you've sort of laid out here.
Yes, I stress this a lot. I think this has been a very critical part of our development over the last 18 to 24 months. A great technology solution with a very big market opportunity requires resources to execute, and people are important. We view this as a necessary investment in order to capture the opportunity. And I believe we have put together a great team, very experienced in their respective areas of focus. And those resources and people do really position the company well to execute on our plan as we move forward.
Okay. Sort of wrapping up here, what are the key milestones that investors should be looking for in 2022? And if you and I sit down again here 12 months from now, what are some of the biggest risks to achieving those goals?
I would say our whole team is extremely focused on driving overall awareness and adoption of INVOcell as we move into the new year, which of course really means driving revenue for the business. So I would look for progress and growth in the existing centers. Of course, we'll report on activities to build additional centers next year. As we complete the transition and taking over from the distribution partner, we expect to start generating revenue into the existing IVF practices, and we will look to expand the number of existing IVF practices that are carrying our product, and of course international activity and really revenue from international activity. I would say really the greatest risk, which has always been the greatest risk or challenge, is continuing to find great partners, distributors, and customers to work with to drive INVOcell in the market, and ones that share our vision on how we can help, how to help us expand the industry and really help treat the underserved patient market. So it's not always easy, and it takes time to find those great partners to help to work with. We're incredibly fortunate to have the current partners we're now working with. I think it's a testament to the technology and the progress that's been made, and the additional clinical data that's come available around the technology and how it can benefit patients. I would also add that we do believe that with the expanded clinical knowledge now available around INVOcell and IVC, along with having our first INVO centers up and running, the process of building awareness and attracting those additional partners and customers should become easier as we move forward.
Yeah. I think we're at the end of our time here. Anything else to sort of add before we complete the discussion here?
Well, I think I would just reiterate that we believe INVO has made tremendous progress this year, again, highlighted by the opening of the first 3 INVO centers. Of course, we realize the progress has not yet been reflected in our operating results, but the pieces we have put in place and the foundation, and of course, those initial clinics now being up and running, we believe that progress will begin to reflect in the results as we move forward. I think the team is very excited and motivated as we head into 2022, and we're looking forward to accelerating the business. And I guess lastly, I'd just like to wish everybody a happy holiday and new year. And as always, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions.
Fantastic. Well, let's leave it there, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. As Steve just mentioned here, if you would like to arrange a meeting, happy to coordinate there. Send me an email, Blum BLUM at lythampartners.com. We'll look to get you taken care of there. We hope you all enjoy the conference. Steve, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.